You are listening to WP Radio's Out and About podcast, brought to you by Genesis Rehabilitation, Physiotherapy, and Sports Injury Clinic. All right, guys, on this episode of Out and About, we've got Matt Rienzo from Crawford Adjusters out of Toronto. We talked about cat claims. Sit back, relax, enjoy this episode. It's great. Matt talks about his experience while down in the Caribbean and taking care of all the clients down there, and just, his in-depth knowledge and kind of dealing with cat claims was amazing. I've never been on a cat claim out of the country, so to find out what it was like being in the Caribbean, not having power, not having water, bad cell service, not even having a vehicle in some cases, really interesting. Incredible guy. So anyway, enjoy this episode. I know I did. I know I love talking with him, and we'll see you soon. All right, guys, welcome to WP Radio. This is the Out and About podcast. It's Terry Doherty, and today we have Matthew Rienzo from Crawford & Company on, and we're going to be talking about catastrophic losses, or cat losses, not cats and dogs, but actually handling cat losses. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me, Terry. Appreciate it.
Matt, I understand that you handled cat losses a couple of years ago, and I think it's a timely topic because we're dealing with another storm, Hurricane Dorian, and Bahamas, and we've got some adjusters heading down there, some that are already there, and maybe you can give some insight into your travels when you were down Turks and Caicos, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I think it's in a very timely manner, especially now with Hurricane Dorian hitting the Bahamas so severely. I sort of fell backwards into cat work several years ago now. It was when there was, July 2012, when we had the massive flood that was followed by a polar vortex. So my cat work actually started doing everything very local. It was just recently, 2 years ago now, that I found myself down in Turks and Caicos. And for myself, it was sort of like the stars aligned, and I threw my name out there, got picked up within 48 hours. I was on a plane and flew to Bahamas, had a quick stop in Nassau, had a layover, and then was rerouted to Turks and Caicos. So I was on the island of Providenciales for initially 6 weeks, and was asked to stay the full 9 weeks, which was the full term of the work down there. And yeah, I think it's a fantastic thing if you have the opportunity and availability to do it. And it's just good for somebody that has a little bit of a flair for some adventure as well.
Well, okay, so that's really interesting, but tell us a little bit more detail. Tell us about, where did you stay? How did you get around?
Mm-hmm.
Were you on a donkey? Did you have a car? Like, was there electricity? What was going on? I know it was pretty bad.
That was all sort of touch and go, to be honest. The experience, and again, I think everybody's experience is going to be very different. I'll speak to mine. And yeah, so I remember flying in from Nassau to Provo, as they call it, and I remember flying over the islands and seeing how just devastated everything was. And I went, my God, what have I gotten myself into? I remember touching down, getting picked up at the airport by the guy that was running the operation in Turks, and very seriously handed us, a set of car keys. I think we might have gotten our per diem, and we were sort of off to the races with a stack of files. And they said, okay, well, here you go. We ended up getting into our accommodations, which for me, fortunately, were very great. We had an apartment-style condo that we stayed in that also doubled as the office for, I think, the 15 or 17 adjusters that were there for the purpose of this outfit. And as a younger adjuster there, I was very appreciative to be in sort of the quote-unquote office setting. So my kitchen table was the office for the handful of secretaries and the managing partner that ran the event. So
wow,
in terms of power and living accommodations, I think those vary, depending on where you are, of course. We did have some power outages, and I had never really talked about those, being, I was newly married at the time and had family back home that was worried sick. So I just told them that everything was fine, and if they didn't hear from me for a day or two, it was because I was so busy. But yeah, so in my experience, we went down for Hurricane Irma. So I was down, I think, a week or so after, say 7 days approximately after Hurricane Irma hit. Touchdown, got settled. We were there for maybe another 6 or 7 days before Hurricane Maria rolled through. So I remember very distinctly seeing and tracking, the weather networks and, hurricane forecasts, and just trying to identify what was coming our way and what we were sort of, in for. Again, made for a unique circumstance. We all had the opportunity to leave if we so chose. There was one person who did request to leave the island. The rest of us decided to stay put and just sort of bunker down. That was an experience, let me tell you.
So you wrote it out.
We wrote it out, yeah. So it was really the only day off that I can recall was having some power outages. So we literally just you hold up with everybody, sit tight, and try not to use your amenities or utilities. And if you had to, it was sparingly because you didn't know how long it was going to last or what would happen. But you don't forget the sound of that 150 mile an hour winds howling and seeing 40-foot palm trees bending over and touching the ground in your parking lot. So
wow. How about fuel outages or fuel loss, or fuel shortages and food shortages? Did that come into play?
Fortunately for myself, no. We did have several road closures and a lot of delays with power getting back to certain parts of town and things like that. But we were very fortunate rather. There was some mention and speak of fuel shortages, but we never actually ran into that where we weren't able to complete a task or go out for, attend a site because of fuel shortages. So I sort of had the, Disneyland version, I think, of what some cat work.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the Bahamas now, and you look at parts of it, and it's just devastated. I mean, like obliterated, maybe is a better word. It just flattened some of the homes. Did you suffer or see that in Turks and Caicos to the same degree?
Without being there, I can't speak to that. From on a individual claim basis, there was such a range. Some people had a broken window or a broken door and a puddle's worth of water damage. I remember meeting with other clients and other insureds who said they were lying in the bathtub of their bathroom holding each other because they had lost their roof and they thought that was going to be the end. So in terms of seeing that devastation, it really varied depending on where you were, and it could have one block to the next. You never know. So that was very different. I think the Bahamas, just in terms of the scope and scale, I have spoken with some people that are on the ground there. To give you an idea, we had, I believe it was about 15 adjusters in Turks and Caicos that were covering the Turks Islands and a few others based on the contracts that were secured. I know that the same outfit in Bahamas, and they are based out of Nassau, they have roughly 50 adjusters. That's 50. So I can't imagine the size and scope of damage and loss there.
So what did you do as the loss adjuster in the cat claim? Were you asked to go down scope, settle? Did you have an appraiser with you? How did that all work? Kind of, give us the ins and outs.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so vastly different from how we handle claims here, and that's actually what I enjoyed most about it. It was so grassroots and elemental. I didn't have access to any Xactimate program. It was literally done on an Excel spreadsheet with a pricing sheet that was provided by the managing partner. He said, based on island prices, because they do, the freight and duty as opposed to taxes. They said this is what the cost of a 2x4 is. This is the price of sheetrock or what have you. So everything was overly simplified, which was fantastic for a newer cat adjuster, which I really appreciated. And even coming down to scoping the properties, I did a lot of it with pen and paper. There was nothing else, and you tried to keep your computer time limited, especially in the onset before power was back and through a lot of the towns. So yeah, it was very, very basic. So we were responsible for really just coming up with a settlement figure that the insured and insurer were happy with. We'd report on that as well as speak to the contents, and again get a very, very rough schedule of loss in place. And again, it was more negotiation tactics than it was hardcore adjusting in the sense of being very, very technical. There's literally no time for that because all you'd get in, or the main objective was settle the building, settle the contents, provide any alternative living accommodations where possible, or just really, advise of what the insurer was going to be cutting the check for.
So basically, grassroots, investigate, adjudicate, settle, move on.
Yeah.
And how many files would you have said, do you think you saw in your time down there in those 9 weeks?
It was funny, I was there for, I think, 96 days, and I had opened and closed 90 files.
Wow.
Yeah, so in terms of the...
That's almost one a day, man.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. So it's not for the faint of heart. There's no way around that. I would say our work weeks were probably in and around 100, 120 hours a week.
So 7 days a week.
For the first, absolutely. For the first 4 weeks, especially while things were, very, rough. That was the best way to go about it. It's hard to, justify taking a day off and going down to the beach when people don't have homes, people don't have water, people don't have electricity. Sometimes it was pretty grim. So you needed to have some downtime to sort of unwind and sort of recalibrate your thought process. But it was very important, I think, to try and do as much as you could for the people that you're meeting on a daily basis. So,
and those people that you met, positive outlook, pretty upset, or did it vary? I mean, these are island people. They're generally good-hearted, smiling people all the time. Did you get that side of it, or did you get the...
Oh, absolutely. And you have, it was a great eye-opener for myself, and I've traveled extensively prior to my work in insurance and claims, but it was so great to see that range of people again as well, because you had some people that were extremely difficult to deal with, that were trying to, make the best use of the system, let's say, as possible. And then you had the other people who would have a missing roof, and you'd ask them how they're doing, and they'd say, "Oh boy, we so glad to see you. I am blessed." And you'd be like, "My God, why can't everybody be like this, right?"
Yeah.
So it was really great to see that range. But on the whole, and the experiences that I had, I remember the very first day I drove into a certain end of town where it was 100% locals that live there, and of course in Turks and Caicos and Provo, their entire industry is based around tourism. So these are all of the local peoples that are working in your hotels, your restaurants, and everything related to everybody else being on vacation. So it was a lesser income end of town, and driving into this place was pretty ominous. When you look around, it's entirely devastated. They didn't have power for weeks. And you go, "Oh boy, what did I get myself into? I am not in Kansas anymore." And the smiles that you'd see on these people's faces, once they knew who you were, they'd move mountains for you to come. They'd help you find your way around. Just salt of the earth people. I still keep in touch and still get regular emails from a handful of them, actually.
Now, these people, they still going to work every day in the hotels, and the ones that stayed open?
Some of them were, yes. Most of them were just sort of sitting tight, and it's a weird and crazy sort of fact of life that they've sort of acknowledged, and they know that every 5, 7, 10 years that they're bound for something like this to happen, and they sort of chalk it up to the price of living in paradise. So yeah, it's pretty daunting.
Yeah, it's crazy. WP Radio's Out and About podcast is brought to you by Genesis Rehabilitation Physiotherapy and Sports Injury Clinic. With 2 convenient locations in the GTA, Genesis strives to provide the best physiotherapy and massage for their patients, along with the ability for treatment of spinal decompression. For more information, please visit genesisclinic.ca. What would be the most important thing you learned or you took away from your time there in your CAT claim?
Great question. Communication. Definitely just having the ability to communicate with everybody and anybody by any means necessary. Because I became a little bit, better known in the one end of town where I was working, I'd be stopped everywhere and say, by anybody on the street. They'd say, "Hey, you were at my house last week. Can you tell me about this? How's my claim coming? Oh, my neighbor needs this. My neighbor needs that." And at one point, I held, informal town meeting, let's call it, on the hood of my car.
Really?
And I literally hopped in the back of somebody's pickup truck, actually. And, I said, "Okay, guys," I said, "I've got, an hour," or whatever the time was, half an hour. And I'll take one question at a time, and I'll do my best. And they actually had another sort of representative of that block who came, and they assisted me with sort of vetting the questions and answering people one-on-one. It was so cool, to see people can still operate under such minimal technology or no technology, and it was very effective, which was
That's
nice
really
to
cool.
see. Nice to see, yeah.
And no issues, never a safety issue for you. Did you run into anything at all? Now that you're back here,
Not with people. It was the four-legged kind there that were a little bit more challenging to deal with. We did have one adjuster that had a run-in with a dog, and I love dogs. Grew up with animals my entire life. These were not pets. I remember being introduced to some people's dogs on their property, and they said, "Yeah, this is my favorite one. He's already bit 16 people." So I went, "Oh Lord, this is a lot more for security and protection than it is for a family furry friend." So yeah, there were a couple run-ins with some dogs that had me jumping on hoods of cars and running.
it's funny that you say that. We were in Turks and Caicos this summer, and we were on the beach, and there was a dog that I thought was a member of this guy's family, and I said, "What's your dog's name?" He goes, "Well, it's not my dog. He just comes here because I have food.
Yep.
He's just a local dog." And I'm like, "Well, okay. Well, does that seem very safe?" And he said, "He's as safe as it can be."
Yeah. And again, those are the sort of little intricate and unique things that you run into with every cat claim. And again, you're going to have a different experience, but this was one that we just became very accustomed to from the bat. You say, "Hey, excuse me, Mrs. Lightbourne, do you have any animals? Are there any dogs that you own or that, are in your neighborhood?" Because every, street would sort of have a handful of territory dogs that just
That's crazy.
made their rounds, and then, few people would feed them, and they would sort of, quote unquote, protect that neighborhood or those few houses. So they're very good alarm systems.
Yeah,
Very good
sounds
alarm
like
systems. Yeah. But you don't want to, you want to stay on their good side for sure.
If you could give some advice to adjusters that are going on cat claims for the first time, what would it be? What do you think people should know, so they have a full understanding before they dive headfirst in? Because it is different than handling anything else.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in a foreign country.
Yeah, well, that's just it. I was going to say
a third world country to begin with, right? Exactly. This isn't first world countries you're dealing with, right?
Well, yeah, not all of our claims were at beaches and sandals, So
yeah.
I'd say at least 85 of the 90 some odd claims that I had, I think were, not $1 million homes, let's say. So yeah, you're dealing with a different demographic for sure. There's really nothing else to it. You have to go in with, again, an open mind, be hyper aware of your surroundings because you are in a new place, dealing with new people. They've just gone through a very traumatic experience. And that's really the best advice I could give. It's pretty daunting for you as well, showing up and being just sort of literally dropped in this environment. Yeah.
Did I know they all speak English, right? English is their first language in Turks and Caicos,
Yep.
as it is in Bahamas right now. So you don't have any language barriers, but did you have any cultural barriers?
Not really. No. I mean, you have to be open to new food groups.
Yeah.
But again, if you're somebody that has a flair for travel and adventure, that's all of the fun. I tried to immerse myself in the culture there as much as possible. On the very first day that we had off, we tried to...
Yep. Oh. Hey, dude. Yeah, thanks. You just drop it anywhere. Yeah, okay. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. You're good to go. That's fine.
Okay.
All right. You were saying when you got there, the very first day you got there.
Sorry. We're speaking to the flair for adventure there. Yeah, it's really important. Oh, shit, I forgot my train of thought here. What were we talking about?
Flair for adventure.
What was I saying?
And you have to have a taste for culture. Or
Food. Oh, yes. Yeah, so sorry. So we were trying to give back as much as possible. So that was going to all of the local mom and pop shops for lunches, for dinners, stopping in and supporting the local vendors that otherwise didn't have, the same sort of clientele that they would if the hurricanes didn't happen. So there was a lot of dining out for a couple of reasons. One was for the sake of time. The other was to support the local shops and keep them open and running. And I remember the very first day we had off. It was on week 4 or 5, and we did a little excursion where we went out and went snorkeling and went diving for conch, and just got to see some of the wildlife there out in and around the reef. And whenever you get those little snapshots of what the island has to offer, it really makes you appreciate the work that you're doing there yourself, because you're saying, wow, if the faster we can restore this place, the faster everybody gets to come back and experience it. And it's been pretty near and dear to my heart. I'm really looking forward to getting back there myself, hopefully sooner than later.
To Turks and Caicos, you mean?
Absolutely.
And go see the people that you helped.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. So, as a guy you've been on more than one cat claim, obviously.
Only one international. So the other 2 were both in Toronto.
Okay. How do they compare?
Workload would be comparable. Experience is night and day.
Is it because you're going home at night?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, one of the hardest parts of being away from home is, you're not, cuddling up in bed every night with your significant other. You're not seeing your kids, giving them a kiss goodnight. You're away. Fortunately, with modern technology, it's not nearly as bad as it has been in, past years or decades ago. But there's that psychological impact of being away from your family and your life here, right? It's great in the sense when you go away to a destination that your entire purpose, 100% of your purpose, is just to give back to this community and do as much as you possibly can in the short time that you've been given there, whether it's 4, 6, 8, 10 weeks, however long your deployment is. It's very nice to know that all of your efforts are concentrated on that. That's, again, when you're working a cat in your local town, city, wherever, it almost acts as a distraction, because people are still in that same amount of distress, whether it be a flood, a polar vortex, a fire, whatever it may be. You do have that distraction of home life and other obligations. And it's harder, I think, when you're still living at home to shut those out, because you still want to go to that baseball or hockey game, or you still want to go to that Saturday night, guys' night out, or whatever your fancy is. So I think that was one of the benefits and advantages to being away, because you're giving 100%.
So you're immersed in it.
Exactly.
So how did you know where to go when you were in Provo? Did you have GPS? Was there street signs? I got to be sure most of the stuff's knocked down.
No, yeah.
Were you going to the red house on the corner, past the 3 goats? How do you know where to go?
Yeah, you look for the donkeys. Actually, what worked out great for us, because for Turks or Provo specifically, was every home had 2 or 3 addresses. There was a builder address of ABC. There was an emergency line of 1, 2, 3, and then the locals all knew the streets and things by their own name or handle. So all of the street signs were gone. Power lines were down, which we thought was terrible, because nobody had a landline. They only had phones when they were charged. So communication and contact was difficult. I became very great friends with the hydro guys.
Okay.
Yeah, shout out to Hydro One. There was a crew of guys from Niagara Falls that I ran in, or sort of haphazardly ran into, and said, "Hey, I'm looking for this block, because there's no street names. You can't identify anything."
Yeah.
So I used the hydro guys that were in there setting the lines back up and getting power back out to all of the homes through the different towns. And I just made very good friends with a gas station attendant. And I'd say to every homeowner, I'd say, "Hey, listen, I have no idea how to find you. So if you could please meet me at, gas station at this corner, that's the last identifiable landmark. Please meet me here, and I will follow you to your house, and we'll go from there." And everybody was great about it. They said, yeah, can I walk there and, you pick me up, or I'll drive you there. I'm driving, this blue Isuzu or whatever the car was, who knows.
Yeah.
The tricky part was driving on the other side of the road, and when your rental car changed out, you're just praying that you had the steering wheel on the side of the car that you're used to. So that.
So you weren't comfortable with the right-hand drive?
Well, not at first. And then what was harder, actually, not the right-hand drive, but coming home and driving on the proper side of the road here became became an issue for the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, back to the left hand.
Yeah, you get used to it very quickly and accustomed to it there. But yeah, there were just all kinds of these little things that you would never think of. But that's the adventure, right? That's what makes it interesting, unique. So. Yeah.
And right-hand driving probably standard, or did you get automatic? Were you lucky enough to get an auto?
Thank God, I had an automatic. I can drive a standard here, but it'd be like driving backwards. So thank God they didn't do that.
Switch your hands around, and it's quite a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me the best thing and the worst thing about it. And we'll finish it off at that. What was the best thing you got out of being there?
Was definitely hands down the relationships. The people that you get to meet, the opportunity to meet these, same people, both insureds, claimants, people that worked on the island, and even people that work within, your company or other adjusters. There were adjusters from all over North America, all over Europe. And again, people that, thank God for social media because we can still keep in touch. And it's just so unique, right? People 10, 15, 20 years ago really didn't have the same ability to communicate the way we do now. It's pretty great to have that available to us.
Would you do it again?
Tomorrow.
Really?
Yes and no. For the experience, yes. I'd be foolish to think I'd go back and have the same experience because I was very fortunate with how great the living conditions were and, everything was for me in Turks and Caicos. Now I've got a baby girl at home and a wife who would be far less happy to see me go. So we'll have to see, but I think when the timing is right, I would love to go back and do that again. It feels very honorable, not to be cheesy, but it's great to know that when you see something like this happen, whether it be Hurricane Dorian, a flood, a fire, what have you, that you can truthfully say and stand there, put your hand up and say, yeah, you know what, I'd like to help. And that's something that I really enjoyed. You don't get to help in the same or with the same impact or meaningfulness that you do in these sort of scenarios. So people are very understanding and very appreciative of the position you're putting yourself in to help them, and they make that very, very well known, and they show that in the way that they deal with you.
Yeah, because I heard, I think it was Michael Macleod said earlier today, he was talking to one of his adjusters that's down in the Bahamas, and she's 6 days and she still hasn't had a shower yet. Like, they're literally, it's pretty squalid conditions for some of them.
Yeah, my understanding was a few of the northern islands and Bahamas were very, very badly affected, and the word decimated was used, so that's always bleak. Again, for my experiences, I was fortunate, and they weren't to that extent.
Yeah.
We saw, particular houses or properties or buildings or dwellings that were, decimated, but there were no fatalities in Turks, which was amazing when you saw the magnitude of damage.
Yeah, and there's over 50 now, I think, or something.
Yeah, I was going to say the Bahamian Islands weren't as fortunate, which is very terrible.
Yep. So. Well, Matt, thanks very much for being on Out and About. I really appreciate it. It was great, very informative. I think people learned a lot, and especially with doing cat claims, we seem to get them more and more with the change in the climate and just everything. There's more storms. There's just more cat claims, and these cat teams popping up everywhere. So thanks a lot, and I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Excellent. Thanks. Thanks again to Genesis Rehabilitation, Physiotherapy, and Sports Injury Clinic for helping us bring you the Out and About podcast. We'd also like to thank all of our other show sponsors, such as Templeman LLP, Winmar, Diane Russell LLP, Archon Forensic Engineers, and SCM Group of Companies. We can't thank you all enough. We'll be back next week with a new podcast for you, and don't forget to contact us for a chance to be featured on the OIAA Trivia Show presented by Archon Forensic Engineers. All you have to do is listen to the last month of podcasts, and you could possibly be called on air to answer a series of trivia questions, and if you answer enough correctly, you could win fantastic seats to come and watch your favorite events in Toronto. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.